Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we are joined by a guest whose career serves as a map of the industry's evolution of over the last 15 years. Ankur Chakraborty is a senior director of platform security at Box, where he is currently architecting the defense of the intelligent content cloud and grappling with the realities of securing generative AI in the enterprise. But to understand how it tackles AI security today, you have to look at where he's been. Ankur spent 9 years at Google as the head of security operations for devices and services, securing the Nest ecosystem and the physical supply chain. He didn't just secure devices, he helped write the rules for how they talk to the world, serving as an editor for the FIDO device onboard specification. Before that, he engineered security at Twitter during its hyper growth phase and cut his teeth on the rigorous compliance floors of Visa. Ankur brings a builder's mindset to security leadership. We're going to dig into what platform security actually means when you're managing large amounts of data, the truth about securing LLMs, and how to survive the transition from protecting credit cards to protecting thermostats. Ankur, welcome to the show. We're super thrilled to have you here.
Thank you for having me. And I'll be honest, I'm a big fan of boring AppSec. I don't know why you call it boring anymore. So,
Yeah,
but this is for me a great honor. So, thank you again. You have had a wonderful set of guest speakers, and you both are luminaries in the field by yourselves. So, thank you. I'm very excited to talk more.
yeah, I appreciate those kind words. Yeah, so I guess we can get straight into some of the things we've been wanting to ask you. So in one of your blogs, you mentioned, I think it was called "Why Your AI Strategy Will Fail Without Security by Design." You mentioned some security foundations for building agentic AI systems: defense in depth, human in the loop, principle of least privilege, trust but verify, observability, and threat teaming, right? But all of these, they don't sound specific to agentic systems as such. They kind of apply to any systems, I would say. So, like, what are we missing here? Help us understand how, if any of these fundamental blocks differ in agentic systems.
And that's a great question. Some of the fundamentals, I think, what you talked about, have not changed in security over the last 30, 40 years. We went through the internet revolution, we went through cloud, we went through, and in all of these, we have had some basic fundamentals stay consistent throughout. We need to know what's executing. We need to have assurance in what goes into the system, and we need to have clean outputs. And regardless of where we are, that tends to stay. Uh, some of the things which I think have become more common with some of the agent aspects, particularly as we are looking at it deeper, is uh, we are dealing less and less with deterministic systems. I mean, we have been at this point. I think I sound like a broken record in this, but it's fairly common that you you cannot you can have very little guarantees on what will be the output from these systems. So, which means that when we execute LLM, which is we give it a prompt, we get something back, we can't expect the same output. We are working, I think there are lots of efforts. I really love the work that's been done by the DSpy team on building like predictive LLM work, but we are still on that probabilistic level, which means that we need some controls that are unique. I mean, human in the loop, I don't think we ever talked about human in the loop when we're talking about web applications. Like when you call an HTTP request, I don't think you would be like, hey, wait a minute. So, and also when we talk about identity, we have always talked about workload identity when we have talked about systems. But with agents now, we have to think about resource identity because these are resources, these are software packages that are running. And those are some things that become unique as we go through these. You have had guests earlier who have talked about that LLMs, like I think it was my notes, Brad, who kind of brought up that we don't need to insert LLMs everywhere. But where we do, we want to make sure that they're reducing overall human toil. he talked about it, context or security, but here. But that also means that we have to be very intentional about where it goes in and how it operates, and then what are the guardrails that we think around.
Yeah. So I think the other question, which might be sort of adjacent to this question, is more about the scaling aspect of it, right? Like, I think the amount of code that is getting generated now using AI is just too much for any engineering team to sort of do code reviews on, right? So in this probabilistic world, right, which again is kind of a different problem altogether, but if you add the scaling problems on it, it makes it so much more worse, right? And as an industry, we have struggled to build secure by default or secure by design frameworks and whatnot, right? So based on your experiences of implementing these LLMs and AI based systems, uh, have you seen certain trends that could be applied in order to tackle some of these challenges, which in order to address the scale, I think that's a different problem, but just to make sure that the risk itself isn't sort of getting more than what it should be, right?
Yeah.
um yeah.
And this is, I think, what you hit upon, Anshuman, is like very crucial point, right? Like it is, we are generating and shipping more features faster than ever. And I mean, Sandesh, like you are building a company, you are actually shipping products. So you're right in the thick of this. And uh, as a security team, sometimes there is that feeling that, hey, we are getting overwhelmed a little bit. But I will look and talk about the optimistic side of this. This is kind of for us, we have never been in a better state from security standpoint. We have never had better tools. Uh, your developers have LLMs. Guess what? Engineers have the same tools. So I'm going to take off my AI security hat for a moment and not talk about the how we secure that, but when we're trying to use AI for security, attackers, we have already seen attackers use them in wonderfully creative ways. Uh, Anthropic's threat report on that was the same thing applies to us. You talked about secure by default, Anshuman, and you're right. Like this has been hard for us. In the past, you needed high quality engineering teams. So very few teams, like Jason Chan talks about high velocity engineering and security engineering in his blogs and shipping that, but that was kind of in the realm of very few teams who were well funded to hire. Now, not. We can build all of these secure defaults. We can support our engineering teams better. We can scale better. We can now drive for outcomes that we couldn't have imagined before. Earlier, we didn't touch production code because it was always a bit of a firewall. Today, there is no reason we shouldn't be. We have access to the same rules. We have the same linters. And a lot of security engineers have strong software engineering, operations engineering background already. They just didn't choose to exercise it for a very long time, but now they can do that at scale. But tell me more about what you think. I mean, Anshuman, you are trying to solve this problem at Lyft.
Yeah.
Sandesh, you are building these
Yeah.
products. What are you guys saying? Like,
I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead, Anshman, and then I'll take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think embracing AI as defenders is probably the right way to go about it. Like you mentioned, if attackers are using AI, and we've seen evidences now, right? As security engineers, you know, we are skeptical, right, by nature. With every new technology, with every new framework that comes out, we have to wear a security hat on and ask a bunch of questions, right? With AI and LMs, I think it's the same thing, but I feel like with AI, it's something different. Like, feels different in the sense that I think it's more than just asking questions. I think for me personally, as a defender, I've been playing with LLMs and AI, right? So I think for me, it's more about using the technology to understand what it is, where it fails, where it succeeds, all of that stuff, right? So I'm no longer asking questions anymore. I'm actually going and trying out the technology myself to understand. I think that has been a trick. It hasn't been a trick, but I think that has been something that I've leveraged quite a bit, and that has really helped me a lot.
Yeah. No, I think kind of, what Anshuman said made a lot of sense. I kind of like to think of like three levels of kind of like productivity gains that you can get with with LLMs within the security team or in the security industry, right? So one is precisely what Anshuman said, which is that every security engineer now is a lot more productive. This is kind of true for most white collar workers. Security engineers are no exception. But the one specific area and where I think for security engineers this is really interesting is something you spoke about, Ankur, which is that for the longest time, not all security engineers were good at writing code, and that was always a limitation, right? You would be like good pen testers, you could write some scripts, but you could never like build stuff, right? And because it kind of was like complementary skills, but not every security, like not every good hacker was also a good builder, not every good GRC person was also good at writing code. But now, because the barrier to writing code entry has gone down so much, there is no excuse for not having the ability to code as a security engineer, right? So that itself to me makes every security engineer so much better than what they were like 5 years ago. Right. And like, when we're all ex-digital, and I remember we used to always like hiring people who had a coding background. Now I'm like, there's no such thing. Like every security engineer is automatically also a developer. That's it. It's game over. Right. And that itself is such a big boost for every security team in the world. Right. When I used to be at Razorpay running a security team, we used to always try and interview and find people who have a little bit of a coding background. Now I spoke to the team recently and everybody writes code there. There's no exception anymore. Right. So I think on the individual productivity level, LLMs have been great for security people. On the next level where I think LLMs are really useful is on automating workflows, right? Especially automating manual steps and boring steps in workflows, right? And AppSec, I mean, my focus is AppSec, and AppSec has a lot of workflows where there's just too much human involvement, there's too much summarization, there's too much understanding of context, etc. And some of these can be automated using LLMs pretty well. So, at CISO, we're building like a security design review product. That was one of those workflows where it was impossible to scale simply because it required human input and of reading unstructured data, which can now be automated in a large way. Right. So the second thing is automating specific steps of the workflow, which kind of, again, I think LLMs have been great at that. The third stage, which is more the autonomous, makes decisions on its own. The human in the loop is only there for exceptions. On that, I'm still a little skeptical. I kind of feel like security is one of those weird industries where, the cost of a mistake is probably higher than kind of the cost of like a false negative is worse than a false positive kind of a thing sometimes. Right. So my sense is that, like building an autonomous agent to do anything without human involvement is kind of scary even for a security use case. So your blog kind of spoke to me as well in the sense that, by the way, AI engineers, software developers hate it when security people say, "Oh, you have to have a human in the loop and everything," because they're like, the whole point was to remove the human, right? So they don't like it. But I haven't seen enough evidence to say, at least for security use cases, that you can have this autonomous agent just like make decisions on behalf of users. Maybe in some limited cases within a company using an internal tool, but I haven't seen that adoption at scale. But on 1 and 2, individual productivity and workflow automation, man, I mean, LLMs are like a superpower for security engineers.
So let me ask you one thing. And actually, I have so many questions around everything. But
I like how the role reversal is happening here, but it's okay.
When we have talked about we have been talking about human. What do you feel? What are the things that we need to achieve in order for us to actually eliminate human in the loop as a control? Like, I think what they have called out is pretty, valid. Like, we want to build all of this so that we as humans can focus on more interesting things, on other problems. And human in the loop adds friction to that. Like, what do you think we need to be in place, we need to build so that, we can do away with human in the loop? Let's start with just coding. Like, what would you like to see so that you don't have to have like developers have to press enter and tab as they're going through this?
Yeah. So, I think this is a fascinating conversation. So just before, I think I want to say around September, October-ish, I was still of the opinion that, look, we need human in the loop because there's no freaking way we can trust a fully autonomous agent to go and do an objective or complete something, right? But I think just over the holidays, I don't know what it is, but I think some folks have had some chance to play with Cloud Code and Opus and whatnot. And I have literally, over the past few days, I've seen 2 or 3 big projects that have been adopted at scale. They're all open source, and they're all based on the principle that there's no human involvement at all. Um, there's one called Claude dot bot. I was just playing with it. It's basically your own AI personal assistant that you can invoke using Slack or whatever it is, and Cloud Code actually executes on your workstation, right? And I was looking at the security page, and this is actually an open source tool. We can add it in the show notes. And as I was looking through the security page, I found out that they've actually thought about it really well, right? They've implemented defense in depth in multiple stages, right? They've thought about different ways to reduce the risk, and I think these kind of strategies is what made me comfortable, right? Where I'm like, okay, I think I can try this out where I don't need to be involved in this agentic loop, right? I can just ask the agent to do something, and I can hope that the agent will go and do its job. So I think the pace at which things are evolving, I've definitely changed my opinions. And to answer your actual question, right? Like what would it take? I think as humans, and this is again a realization I've had over the past few weeks, is that you know when we say human in the loop, I don't think it was adding any value as such, right? Like if an agent would ask me to approve something, and if if I get 50 such requests on a daily basis, there's no freaking way I'm going to review each one of them, right? So I was anyways approving all of them, right? So I think that is basically yeah, just the word human in the loop used to make me feel comfortable that look, I'm still in control. But I feel like that was based on uh, you know experiences and opinions that still weren't well formed, and I
Yeah.
feel like we are finally at an inflection point that is changing.
Okay, that is really interesting. So I think the answer to your second point, right, Anshuman, which is that what is the value of kind of hitting yes 50 times without knowing what you're saying yes to, because you never reviewed this anyway, and if you do it, you lose your mind, right? Is I think more about security and sorry, less about security and more about identity, because now you're attaching responsibility to a human, because you don't know when you say assign a responsibility to a bot, nobody knows what that means. So I think the right solution to that problem is essentially to kind of figure out identity and access management for agents. That's the only way to solve it, not improve human in the loop. You're right. You can't really improve. You can't make the situation any better by doing anything else. The only other part I'll say, and this is kind of a interesting thing I heard, is that you still need humans, but not so much in the loop, but like before the loop almost. So if you think about a lot of the training, the large model companies, the way they improve their models, etc., is they hire all these experts to kind of build evals, etc., right? So the idea really is that you need expert humans, you need all of us, like people who are in the security industry, to kind of build world-class evals to kind of make the agents better, or to make the models better, or reinforcement learning better, or whatever AI tool you're building to make it better before it's being built, rather than being in the loop. So it's almost like your humans are moving towards, making shit up now, but shift left of humans. Like you're going there before the agent is built, rather than being in the loop on execution. Having said that, I don't think there's ever going to be a scenario where 100% of all decisions should be made by agents. I think there are as many as there are examples of Claude Code doing amazing things over the last 3-4 weeks. There are definitely examples of it doing stupid shit, right? So, and there's no question about it, right? So, I think, and if you're running a security team in an enterprise, or if you're running, a fintech company or whatever, right? There's no way that anyone, like the example I gave is I used to work at a payment gateway company. If somebody's making changes to the payment gateway core logic, man, there's no way some human expert is not looking at it before it goes through, right? Just for just to make sure. There are probably 10 people in the entire company who know how it works, right? So I kind of feel like two things need to happen. Three things need to happen. One, we got to figure out IAM for agents, which I think is like a amazing opportunity right now. I think it's a big space that somebody needs to, many people are working on. The second thing is, I think the humans, the security experts, need to be part of the eval process to make sure that the agents are in general do a better job at security. And the third aspect is, I think, we still should be hitting 50. Humans need not be in the loop 50 times a day on something, but it has to be dramatically lower. But we have to be better at kind of figuring out when to invoke human in the loop. And I think that'll just get better over time. Sorry, long answer, but
no, but actually, what you basically mean is that we need better guardrails. So we need to be able to shift left and catch right.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Is yeah, shift left and catch right. I've never heard of that, but it makes sense. I think observability is definitely going to play a big role for sure, right? Like just kind of and I don't know if you guys been following all the chatter or the holidays, but context graph is something I think I'm seeing a lot of. And Ankur, I'm aware that you're very much familiar with the whole concept of a graph, because I think we've spoken about it before. But that itself is very fascinating, because uh, I think there was an article from Foundation Capital, I believe, which I think has been circulated quite a bit, where I think Jaya Gupta, I believe her name, she mentioned that the company that solves this problem of this context graph of an entire organization is going to be the next $1 trillion company. And if we draw parallels between what she said and what the blog said and the security engineering world, I find so many similarities, right? Because if you look at vulnerability management itself, right, uh, how we triage vulnerabilities, what is the reason behind something is a false positive or not, that those reasoning often gets lost. Sometimes they are not even tracked, right? And I think those are the decision traces which are going to be super key in an agentic world, right? Because agents have the capability to reason, act, and observe, right? And how are they thinking, what actions they're taking, what is the intent. If we can capture all of those decision traces, I think we can start building a context graph, and we can start understanding what is really important to organizations, right? And I think that is what, at least from an AppSec perspective, we just haven't had so far, right? Like, how do we decide if something is worth fixing or not? We have no idea about what the organization, we have a few things that we know the organization cares about, but when you go at the micro level of per repo, per code base, right, those information is not there. So yeah, any thoughts, opinions on this whole piece of context graph,
I
Ankur?
mean, Anshuman, you opened up two different boxes.
I know.
Really good.
Let's just
Wow.
go with whatever way
Yeah.
you want to
I
go.
mean, you talked about decision traces and all of those pieces. So let's actually, uh, so I think the part and everywhere that we struggle with some of the AI security, agent security, LLM security basis has been is that we don't necessarily have very clear context. Yeah, sorry, that was overloading the context term, but very clear visibility in how the processing happens. We don't know how the input is consumed. We don't know how the output is generated. Like we know, no, but we don't know, no, so to speak. Uh, I love the work that has been happening around mechanistic interpretability, where we are trying to, which also seems to be like awesome, but for there, it seems today we are kind of at the stage where if somebody's solving a problem and we ask them to show their work, we are at the show your work, but we don't necessarily know what's going on in their heads. And somewhere, if we want to build safe, reliable systems, I mean, with people, we have got away for like 50,000 years by not knowing what's going on in their heads and just looking at what they're writing and doing. The results have been interesting. But when we are looking at machines that are able to do that at far higher scale, I think to your point, that those traces are no longer sufficient. Uh, sure, I'm glad you showed me your work, but how did that work come to be? So I really love all the work that's happening around mechanistic interpretability, around seeing like what are the particular neurons that get triggered on particular instances, because a lot of the problems that we are seeing today will not be solved till we have that visibility and be able to make that distinction. But what do you guys think? Like, you have been, a lot of your guests have talked about this in the past. So
Yeah, I feel like, and again, this is just my opinion based on so many conversations we've had, is I think every AppSec vendor is trying to answer this big elephant, or at least answer this big question of, okay, what is it that they're trying to build? Are they building a single point solution, or are they trying to build a platform, right? And I think nobody knows that answer, because if you're building a single point solution, there's no freaking way you can build that context, right? Because the context comes from different workflows, it comes from different scanners and whatnot. And if you build a platform, right, you will basically have to operate at a speed, right, which kind of outpaces every other vendor. And you know, you need to have the right team, you need to be solving the right problems. So I think there's a big question mark in my mind. I think there's one blog I saw from I forget the name, but I think companies are starting to think about, okay, so everybody understands the term context engineering by now, right? Because I feel like until 6 months ago, that phrase itself wasn't quite clear to people. But now I think people understand, in order to make agentic and AI systems work, you need the right context, right? Now, how do you do that context engineering, or how do you bring that context? I think that's the next thing that folks are trying to solve. And I don't think anybody has any answer, but I think the trick will be to essentially, capture what agents are doing, and then associate those decisions with what is important to an organization. And then I think that's what will sort of hopefully shed some light on what this context really is, I feel.
Yeah. So, okay, I have a slightly contrarian take on this. Okay, so I think context engineering is really helpful, and there's a lot of work to be done on context graphs, and yeah, missing context is kind of leading to a lot of terrible signal to noise ratio on some of the results. So there's no question about that. But I think Ankur made like an interesting point even just before we started talking about this, which is like, hey, we don't know how the brain works, but we're okay with the output. Right? So we judge the output. Why don't we judge how the output came about? So why the hell are we doing that with LLMs? Great point, right? But I think because every time there's a paradigm shift, every time there's a different way of doing things, there's like anxiety surrounding it on how this happened or why this happened. And more importantly, you also want to know if something failed, why it failed, right? So when you see AI slop right now, it's very clear to you that's AI slop, right? You don't need to know that it's AI slop. But if you kind of figure out why the AI slop happened, or because this is the prompt they gave and this is the response they gave, you have like a little more empathy for the person who kind of wrote the sloppy thing, right? And you're a little more forgiving about it. So what we've learned while kind of building CISO internally is that one of the things that's kind of important in the interim while we kind of move to a completely AI first world, which will eventually happen, is explainability, right? So if you can actually not make AI feel like magic, that's actually the critical part, right? Very often AI feels like magic, right? And magic, when it works out, looks great. When it fails, it looks horrible, right? But on the other hand, if you can kind of lift the hood and say, hey, here are the 4 steps the LLM took, and because of which, and this is the output of each stage, and then when the output is wrong or the output is bad, you can trace back the steps and you say, okay, step 2 is where things screwed up, and here's how we can improve it. Then it kind of makes it makes it easier to adopt the technology, and more importantly, it makes it easier to live with non-perfect outcomes, right? So I think a lot of the reasons, Anshuman, to your point on why building point solutions may not be the end of the world, is because even if you don't get perfect output, what you'll get is explainability. And if you're able to convey the message without having to get lost in the weeds, right? So I think that's kind of the core part. I think where context is really important is that even with all the explainability, even with all the things, there's kind of a limit to which you can build useful tools without sufficient context. So at that point, yeah, once you hit that limit to get to the next stage, you need more context. And at that point, Anshuman, you're absolutely right. You need signals from everywhere, and you need to convert them into context and kind of improve the outcome of your tool. But I think explainability is kind of the bridge between being able to consume AI results without feeling like I don't know what's happening under the hood.
So, how much of this do you feel is uh, kind of satisfying an internal anxiety versus actual value? Because even if we look at, like, when we talked about the same, like, Claude, or like, I look at Boris and Andre Karpathy's tweets, and they're far better programmers than I will ever aspire to be. They So, how much of this do you feel is like anxiety versus value in a
Oh,
lot
it's
of these?
100% anxiety. It's 100% anxiety, and I think it's a lot more acute in industries like in security because we are risk managers, right? So I think again, it's the old thing, right? We got to get everything right. The attackers have to get one thing right, kind of a thing, right? So it's kind of we're in that mentality, right? So when you're building software, as long as you build good software, all your bugs are excused, right? But that's not how a security engineer works. Right? You got to find every freaking vulnerability, right? So when you're in kind of an industry where anxiety comes very easily, right? You have to calming the nerves of the user is really, really important, right? So it's 100% that, and it's 100% transient, and I don't think this is going to be the case in a few years from now. I mean, I hate making AI predictions because I never get them right. But like 6 months, 12 months, I don't know how long it is, but eventually there's not going to be a state where you need humans in the loop. There's not going to be a state where we need to be explainable. You will do what we do with humans today, which is just the output and nothing else. But I think it's kind of the rite of passage, right? That's what you need to do today to get there. I mean, even if you look at when ChatGPT came out for the first time, it would give you an output. The moment the thinking step came and you could click on the thinking button and know what it's thinking, that dramatically improved. Like when the O1 moment happened, right? After, after DeepSeek and everything came out, the moment it started explaining its thinking and then you saw the output, you were a lot more, I hate using this word, but it's like almost empathetic to the AI, saying, yeah, you screwed up, but I know why you screwed up. So maybe I could teach you to be better, right? And I think, again, I don't do that anymore, but I definitely did that a lot the first time the thinking came out. So I think it's just calming anxiety. You're absolutely fine, right about that.
Actually, thank you for sharing that, Sandesh, because what you even called out was very, very astute. Security is often not just about making something secure, but also making sure that
It
people
appears
who are
secure.
using it feel secure.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh, And often, like, I think a lot of, and sometimes I think we don't invest enough of our time in building good UI UX design where the design, I mean, at the end of the day, how do our customers, users, everything communicate? It's through interfaces.
Hmm.
And sometimes in security, it's not just enough that it works in the background, but also how do we communicate so that you evoke that feeling that, okay, it's working. I'm safe. And yeah, I feel that that's a place where we as an industry still have a lot of work to
Yeah, I mean,
invest in.
it's like law enforcement, right? It's not just enough that justice has to be done; it has to be appear like justice has to be done, right? So I think both are kind of important, and appearance can change over time. But anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Speaking about tools, platforms, and experiences, Ankur, I'm kind of curious to hear from you, right? Like in this era now, with uh, everybody trying to basically solve these problems, how do you sort of decide which tool or platform would work for your team and company, right? Like, do you care about the I'm sure you care about the experience, but is there, like, do you have a list of things that you evaluate all the companies against?
So that's a very good question. And as we are thinking through this, and by the way, I know everybody says that's a very good question and so on, but we live this, right? How do we make through what are the decision models that we go through? Uh, Primarily three things. One is how much is this contributing towards driving our security outcomes? Uh, More and more, I think we are trying to get away from security processes to seeing success as outcome. So by outcome, I mean, did this thing make something more secure or not? Then that's critical for us to understand. Second is how much more or less toil did it add? Everything has a cost. And it's not just financial or monetary, right? Like using, spending time, tuning, and all of these are human costs that go into this. And that's investment that goes there that doesn't go into something else. So how much of that comes into? And second is how modular is something, like can I connect it into other things? How easy are the data schemas so that I can take one, push it into all of these pieces? These are the three broad things. And fundamentally, what is below these is at the end of the day, I want our teams to be really becoming really, really good at two things, right? We want them to be really good at finding the next set of weaknesses, issues, and vulnerabilities. And we want them to be really good at eliminating them from across our applications or our areas of risk that we own. So in some cases, platform plays like, okay, you give me all in one, works. In some, I know Travis, when he was talking, he mentioned that kind of pulling together best of breed. And I'll be honest, when Travis was talking, I did not believe that. I was like, okay, platforms help because it's easy. But, the last 6 months, I think like a lot of these things have become so easy that putting together a lot of these tools on your own, like all the way from commercial and open source and getting them to work is becoming easier. The amount of toil that was required for that, I think a year ago, has reduced significantly. And again, we don't have to get to 100%, right? If something improves if what used to take me 2 weeks to get to 100%, if in 3 days I can get to 70%, and then I can add 2 more days to do that, I still gained 50% efficiency, right? And reduced my toil by half. So we have value in all of these as we go through. But that's the decision-making framework that I think we are relying more and more on.
Yeah, so I think I want to dig deep into the first thing you mentioned is, you actually see if it is improving your security outcomes, right? Can you sort of walk us through, like, how do you decide if a platform, or if a single point solution is actually improving your security outcomes? Like, when you approach these vendors and evaluations, do you already have a set of inputs and outputs that you expect to achieve? Like, how are you thinking about it?
Yeah. Um, when we're talking about outcomes, we're also thinking about the problems that we are trying to solve. Uh, I will pick everybody's favorite topic in this room, which is SAST. Right. All of us love SAST, hate SAST, and have multiple spectrums of feelings across for SAST. The problem that we're trying to not solve is we need to do static analysis. The problem often that we are trying to solve here is I need to make sure that vulnerabilities are found and eliminated from my code base before it makes it into production. Right. What are the solutions for that? SAST becomes one of those solutions. Right. So now when you talk about outcomes, now this is where we are looking for that outcome, right? So what is the particular solution, tool, process, mechanism that helps me identify these things quickly and be able to eliminate them before they make it into production? Because the whole point of doing this is, I think everybody now agrees, the later you find a vulnerability, the more expensive it is. So I want to reduce that cost on the business. So SAST becomes often the dominant way to look at that. But does it mean it is the only one? Not necessarily. You have a lot of teams that have invested a lot of time in building high quality fuzzing infrastructure. You have teams that spend a lot of time doing a lot of manual review because sometimes that ratio works out better. But that's why the outcome orientation really helps, is because when I'm going to a vendor or I'm evaluating an open source tool, I can very much look at it and be like, okay, what did you find for me? What did you actually eliminate for me? And it's we don't have to hold this to very strict, but any spectrum of the outcome orientation means that you automatically make for better partnerships, because all of these tools and vendors, that they are also running a business, and we want to be good partners with them, and we want them to succeed. So if I bring somebody into my environment, even for a POC, I'm rooting for them. Like, so most of the time, my question is like, what do you need? So that this is what I need to see, but what do you need in order to get to that success?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I always have with measuring outcome in security is that, especially in application security, right? I think in maybe in like incident response and stuff, it's a little simpler because without an incident, there's no incident response and stuff. Is that it's almost like the ultimate outcome is software velocity, or the ultimate application security metrics are software development metrics. And software development metrics are not impacted just by security, but by a bunch of other things. So if suddenly you have better software velocity and also you bought a new SaaS tool, it's easy to correlate the two and say, hey, you have better velocity because you have a better SaaS tool. But it's just so much more complicated than that, right? Because it may be something else outside of security which influenced it. So then I think the only option becomes saying, hey, what can you measure and can I improve that? And that becomes in the number of false positives, the number of false negatives, time to scan, surveys, NPS scores, right? Basically, the lamppost effect, right? You're looking for the keys where the light is, right? So I think that's probably the hardest part of measuring security outcomes, because AppSec outcomes, because in the end, it really depends on engineering and not so much on precisely what the security team or the tools do.
Actually, that's a wonderful way to look at this. And if I just want to take that one step ahead, when we look at velocity, any reduction in velocity is basically a cost. So,
yeah.
Right. So you're almost seeing that as a cost of goods sold aspect. Like, My
Yeah.
accounting friends are going to hate me for this, but here I go.
They're probably not listening
Well,
to the Boring Abstract podcast. Or to-
here, then let's expand your audience. Let's bring in some accountants and hot takes for them. Like
yeah.
velocity is a cost. So
Yeah.
it is the more time it takes, the more expensive it becomes.
Yeah.
So, but I think the velocity is the part where, yeah, like how can I make this cheaper or how can I make this more expensive? And if I'm making if I'm increasing my cost of goods sold, then obviously I want my margin to be higher. So if I'm if I'm reducing velocity, I want somewhere to see either fewer vulnerabilities, improved security outcomes. So you still come to the same metrics. But but what the framing changes. So to your point, like false positives, it's a cost.
Yeah.
It's toil. Like why do we hate false positives? Because mostly because they are wrong, and none of us like wrong things.
Wrong things.
But also we are spending time and effort and energy to remove those, and that's something that we are not investing somewhere else. So that's where these metrics become important, and that's how some of that outcome orientation helps. Is okay. So tell me this is the problem that I'm trying to solve. What do I need to pay to solve that problem? And those metrics become that cost. So it's not just a financial piece. So that's why sometimes even the build versus buy versus open source works, because when we think build, it is like, okay, we have to write the code now, we have to maintain this. But sometimes when you're building, you are not trying to build a whole solution for 100 companies. You're trying to build one solution for one team.
Correct.
And sometimes that is good enough.
Yeah.
Versus in buy, it's not just the financial cost sometimes, but also everything else associated with it. And sometimes in the build versus buy versus open source conversations, I would like us to spend more time thinking along those lines. We still might end up with the same result, and I want to push our partners to solve those more for us, because again, I want them to succeed. This is the industry I live in. I want this industry to thrive. So, but that's how I would like them to think about that. Every single time there's a friction, there's a cost, it changes the decision matrix for people. Or it changes the decision matrix for me.
Yeah, speaking about false positives and cost and velocity, Ankur, if you were given a choice between a false positive and a negative, which one would you choose? Like, which one would you go for?
Oh my God. Now you're asking me statistical questions. All right. Let's do this. So I've left my biometrics life behind a long time ago, but you often had that curve of number of results for false positives and false negatives. And you would have that one intersection where you're like, yes, this is the world where I live. If there are biometrics people, please don't hold me accountable. Yes, I got this 90% of this. I would normally choose neither of them. But false negatives are one of those unknown unknowns. Like, I don't know what I missed unless I attach something else. And if something else that I attached found it, then that again has a fork. Like, does that mean I need two things, or that thing was just better? So sometimes I think the false negative we are able to eliminate through the process of work and research and building better capabilities. False positive is the cost that prevents me from reducing that. So my hidden answer is, if you can get rid of the false positives for me, I can spend more time removing the false negatives.
How about the true negatives?
Okay. What would be a true negative?
So, a true negative would be basically a valid vulnerability which exists in the system, but it hasn't been found by whatever tool or platform you're using. So, would you rather know about things that are wrong, or would you rather not know about things that exist in your system?
I'm going to take a second to think through that convolution that you just put me through, Anshuman.
Feel free to take your time. Yeah.
Again, for a lot of the false things, those are costs. So to your point, yes, I would love to know about that lost true negative, like the thing that was not discovered. But normally things that are not discovered are because we have to build mechanisms to look for them. We have to build mechanisms to find them. We have to find time and effort for people to do research and build the capabilities to find them. And I feel like now I'm sounding more like get the false positive like executioner. But if you get rid of false positives, guess what? I'm spending more time doing those things.
Yeah, no,
But-
I think there's a trade-off there, right? Because, and I ask this question because this is something I think about quite a bit is,
yeah.
would I rather have a SaaS solution that gives me a bunch of things that I don't simply care about, but it is possible that I might find something, valid in there, or would I rather use a tool that only reports things that are true positives, right? But it is possible it might not report a bunch of things, and I don't know where that
So
line is.
I'm going to
Oh,
actually push around a little bit here. And Sandesh, I want to hear from you because you are the one building some of these things as you go.
Yeah.
But as LLM inference costs are going down, also I feel like humans have to do less and less of that noise reduction, and a lot of that filters that we would have to build ahead, we can actually start delegating that to capabilities that can do it much faster than us. But
Yeah.
so ironically, a year later, we might be more tolerant of things like false positives because we can
Yeah.
attach something or
Yeah.
have somebody else attach something that does that for us. But Sandesh, you are the one building. So
Yeah. No, I actually, this is something that I've learned as I've kind of been building the product, is that um, security folks, like including me, by the way, always said that we hate false positives. But the reveal, and we always talk about the Swiss cheese way of doing things. Even if I miss something in SAST, it's okay, but maybe I'll find it in Dest. But if you have a lot of noise, then I might not even look at the things which are important. That's kind of the theory. As a consultant, I've sold that idea to customers also, by the way, right? Even before I became a practitioner, right? But reveal preferences are very different. So when we do POCs, right, with customers, they will always dock more points for things we missed, which they thought were obvious, versus two or three extra things which they know to be false, but they know to be false because they have this other context that the tool did not have. And they're like, yeah, it's okay. You didn't have the context, but I'm glad you brought this out. Oh, it's interesting that you thought about this, but of course it's not true, so it's okay. Right? So the revealed preference of security people is the same anxiety thing that I spoke about, is that in the end, they don't want to be docked for missing shit. Right? So I think on every podcast, on every blog, on every conversation I have, everyone always says that we hate false positives more than anything else. But the revealed preference is that as a community, we are very, very good at needle in the haystack. It's frustrating. Like, it's not easy to get needle in the haystack, right? But that's one of our core skills, right? To be honest, like if you're a security person, deriving signal from noise is what we do really, really well as an industry.
we are
right?
really good magnets, is what you're telling us.
Exactly. Yeah. We're really good magnets, right? So we're really good at that. So that's one point. But the second point, and Ankur, you already made my second point, so there's no point saying that again, I guess, is that LLMs as a triage tool are fantastic, right? Because again, triage does not need to be precise. So, you don't need deterministic triage. It's okay if you don't consistently do the exact same triage 14 times, it doesn't really matter. You're trying to reduce the amount of noise. So whether it reduces 90% or 95%, it's still reducing a bunch, right? So I think a bunch of SaaS tools do this really well. In fact, within even our product, we'll run an assessment, we'll get a bunch of results, and then we'll have a different kind of LLM system do a triage of our own results, and then remove what we appear to be false positives, right? So that's a pretty common structure now in many AI tools, that you do the maker and the checker within the same product. There'll be some inherent biases, but it's still like much better results, right? So I think two things are simultaneously true. I think the revealed preference of security folks is that they care less about false positive than false negative, although they say otherwise. And I know I'm saying that to you here who are security practitioners, right? But the second part, I think, is that LLMs kind of actually make this better. So Ankur, I'm with you that I'm more optimistic that a year or two from now, actually speaking on false positives, things will get better. Right? I'm a lot more optimistic that the number of false positives will go down, and therefore humans will work on interesting, useful things and look at signals, than I am about us eliminating human in the loop or actually having agentic systems which will completely take ownership. I think this is probably the real winner on of LLMs within AppSec, in security in general. And again, I don't want to open another can of worms because I know we're coming close to the end of the time. But the other area where this is playing out is AI SOC. We all assumed SOCs are going to be replaced by AI powered socks, but what's really happening is that human socks are getting better because of AI. Right. Again, I'm not that we should go down that rabbit hole right now. It probably needs another episode, but that's another area where I saw the same pattern playing out.
So I do have one question then for both of you, since we are coming close to that. So what, and Sandesh, this is about some of the revealed preferences. I think, what is, do you feel an underlying fear in our industry across? And I'm talking many industries, not just AppSec, like broadly security, that all of us have, but no one is really talking about. And by the way, this
I,
question for both.
yeah, I can go first because this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit. Is there's actually quite a few things, and I think the first thing that comes to my mind is like we've been approaching security in the wrong way, right? And I think we are finally at a point where we can actually start approaching it the right way. But just because we've been doing the wrong thing for so many years, that change is kind of difficult, the most difficult thing. And I think uh, folks are not talking about the need for change enough. I feel, yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah. So Ajman, you know, okay, I might get the terms wrong because it's like a US pop culture thing, and I haven't lived in the US for a long time. When you do class action lawsuits, you kind of need, I think they call either patient zeros or plaintiff zeros or whatever they call. You need that one great example, which will actually kind of like change minds of people, right? So that's kind of the thing. I kind of feel like you hit the nail on the head. Like the example you gave of human in the loop, people saying yes 50 times a day, it's just such a fantastic example, right? But you almost need that one tool, one startup, one open source project, something like what a Burp Suite did or a Zap Proxy did a little back in the day to show the way, right? And once that way is shown, I kind of feel like the dominoes will continue to fall. But you're right. I kind of feel like, we are one or two really cool innovations away from that actually changing. But yeah, I think Ankur did. My answer to that is that we kind of feel like more security equals more spending sometimes, and I think that's a thing that that really hurts our industry, because you kind of get to this, even when you spend good money, it kind of feels like, oh, there's this impression that at least from non-security executives, that being serious about security means allocating more budget to it, and in my opinion that's like a cop out rather than actually thinking about security. And I think that's kind of my worry, because even when we build good security products like we believe that we do, it's hard to kind of it's hard to justify the spend, because the impression now is becoming saying, oh, just throw more money and maybe we'll feel like we're doing our part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's one more thing I would love to add here is, just over the past year or so, we've seen so many companies, startups raise pre-seed, seed, Series A, and they're all trying to solve similar problems. And I don't know what's going to happen to all of these companies because, you know, again, the pace at which things are evolving now, these things are solvable within companies themselves. And again, I don't want to start the build versus buy because I know there are different schools of thought, but that is also something that I don't know what's happening and why people are not thinking about it or sharing opinions loudly. But I think um I would love to know, Ankur, if you have any strong opinions on that.
So strong opinions, many, but I'll just
Yeah.
hold to one. Is I'll bring up what two things that you have brought up earlier. So one, context engineering, which is primarily making sure that the tools, models, anything and evaluations is going to kind of become the next superpower for security teams, because context is not just the context about the applications, but the security knowledge, the expertise that people have, the organizational knowledge, and bring that together into a cohesive manner that can be actually uh, consumed by tooling. So I think that's something that we need to talk more about, because this is critical, not just like as a marketing function, but also as how we have always succeeded. Security has succeeded when we have tried managed organizations, business, and technology together with security expertise. Second, we need to spend more time on investing in our platforms, underlying that we are building. Our platforms need to become our guardrails. So that's when security teams, to your point, Sandesh, yeah, you don't always win by spending more money. You win by spending the right amount of money in the right amount of and by money I mean resources. So people, everything in the right targeted place, and that's.
I mean, you made such a good point, right? I mean, I kind of feel like, we didn't get a chance to go into platform security engineering too much, but I kind of feel like API gateways have done more for security than many security tools, right? I mean, that's kind of what helped security, and that's a platform that we built, which is not even technically a security platform, but it's like, when you build a platform, when you think about security by default, or when you think about platform security, there's a lot to be solved there. Yeah, but so I'm with you 100% there.
Well, Ankur, we had more than 5-6 questions, but I think we just managed to cover one, and then we just went on different directions, which is awesome, because that's exactly what we like and appreciate. So, thank you again so much for coming and just sharing your thoughts, opinions. It was I had a blast. So yeah, we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Man, thank you for having me, and thank you again for doing this, guys. I mean, this is wonderful that all you have done about all these years, and congratulations on starting the Boarding AppSec community. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. If you like the show, please share this with your friends and colleagues. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach Anshuman on Twitter at Anshuman_BH. That's ANSHUMAN_BH. And me, Sandesh, at Jubba on Jeans. That's JUBBAONJEANS. See you next time.